Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Safety Committee. I am Mark Conway, Chair of the Committee and representative of the 4th District. Here today we have a number of members of the committee, starting with Vice Chair Zach Blanchard of the 11th District, Yitzi Schleifer of the 5th District, Felicia Porter of the 10th District, Danielle McCray of the 2nd District. I'm sorry, Danny. Paris Gray of the 8th District, and soon to come, Tony Glover of the 13th District. And also in attendance, we have Odette Ramos of the 14th District. Representing the Mayor's Office, we have Tyler Chanella, we have DeAndre Hayes. DeAndre, thank you. And committee staff for the hearing is Ethan Navarre. Today, the committee will have a hearing to discuss Bill 25-0018, Emergency Scene, Unauthorized Persons Prohibited. This was introduced by Councilwoman Ramos on February 10th, 2025. And the bill would prohibit the presence of an unauthorized person within the boundaries of an emergency scene as established with certain penalties. So I will turn it over to Councilwoman Ramos to walk us through the bill. It's been quite some time since we had our first hearing. There's been a whole lot of back and forth, a number of recommended amendments, and some amendments to consider here today. Councilwoman Ramos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members, for giving us the time on this. This bill, 25-0018, what it does is it requires that the fire chief create a fire or emergency scene around an emergency with whatever barricade, tape, whatever is necessary, and that only certain people are allowed in that scene. And so what the bill does is it very explicitly talks about what an emergency scene is, as well as what are the people allowed in the scene, and then also makes sure that allows for penalties as well. So that is the basics. The reason to do this is because, as many of you already, I think all of you, my colleagues, go to your emergencies and your fires in your district and see so many people coming to the scene. And so what this does is it keeps everybody safe. It allows for the firefighters and EMT and for whoever's in command to keep everybody safe and at a safe distance if you're not one of the people that's in this bill. And also allows for residents who have just come out of a fire or of an emergency to be able to have the time to meet, to just try to address the trauma that they've just been through, for us as council members, as well as for DCD or for fire or EMT, to work with them and be there for them on their worst day, and be able to give them that time to figure things out. And so I did obviously approach this bill with the intent of figuring out this issue of some of these contractors showing up to these scenes, and a lot of my constituents complaining about that situation. But this isn't really about them. This is about anybody interested in going into a scene, media, whoever it is that's not on this list. So it doesn't even mention these companies in the bill. So that's the basics of the bill. You'll note in my testimony I sent around and then revised testimony, we do have a set of amendments that I worked with the Mayor's Office and the Law Department on, and I'll go over those right now. I just want to back up one other piece real quick before going through the amendments and just say this, that emergency scene could last an hour, it could last several hours, but that doesn't prohibit anybody from talking with the residents or whoever's in the scene at any time, by phone or whatever. But as soon as that scene is gone, then everybody can talk to everybody. So we're not like banning people from the scene other than just outside of those boundaries during that time that there is an emergency. Okay, so the amendments. I'm going to walk through the reprint. Mr. Chair, you want me to do that, or you want me to walk through the actual amendment document? The reprint, it might be easier to see because
It's probably easier to do the reprint.
Yeah, okay, because it's in context. So everyone should have that in front of them. If not, I have another copy here. So the first set in the second page is that the new language is in capital, and it talks about responding to an emergency. And instead of using caution tape in that second section, we say barricade. So that's a general term, so that the chief is not bound to just use tape. That he or she could use whatever, whoever's in charge of the scene. And then also that all of this is removed. This added language in underline says, unless the chief makes a determination that public safety hazard remains. So the barricades would stay up as long as there is no public safety hazard. Okay. The next amendment is on page 3, and it's the list of the authorized persons. So in the original version, we had a line for firefighter and then one for EMS personnel. The recommendation was to put just all EMS, EMT, and firefighters under the Baltimore City Fire Department. The second is the police department. Third is a victim or family of the victim. And then we had a discussion, if you'll remember, at our hearing about the use of putting actual American Red Cross in here. And what we've done instead is to come up with a definition about a community or volunteer-based nonprofit organization that supports and assists victims and survivors of disasters. And so I think that answers some of the questions from before, and I very much appreciated the feedback on that. And then there's the remuneration. Okay, so that's the other amendment. And then the last piece is on the last page. So there was a long discussion between Mr. Chair and I about the penalty issue. And right now, in the bill, it says that the penalty for crossing this scene is 90 days, it's a misdemeanor, and it could be 90 days in jail or a $500 fine, or both. And one of the suggestions from folks who have been engaging in this bill was to remove the jail time. And I asked Chief Wallace his thoughts about that, and he in his wisdom said, let's make it same as what happens if you cross a crime scene tape. And so that's what we've done. It is 60 days if you cross a crime scene or the $500 fine, or both. And you'll note, once folks do the research, that there isn't a specific statute that says if you cross a crime scene tape, but what the police use is the disorderly conduct or disobeying an order of an officer, which has these penalties. We also thought of adding that, reference, but the law department said no, because, the fire department, police, or the city should be able to engage those charges and not just the police department. So the last thing is the mayor's office and the chief wanted to make this effective right away and not just 30 days after enactment. So that's the outline of the amendments. And you'll see that here. I do want to go over, there was a set of amendments that was given to us by those who opposed the bill. And I just wanted to go over those for a minute. I don't have them here, but one was this issue of the jail time, which I had just outlined. The other was this idea that anybody who is authorized to go in the scene can't refer to certain companies or anything like that. And that is we can't anyway. We are under the ethics code that says that we cannot steer, and we do not do that. So it made sense to just, we have to serve under and be advised under the ethics code. The other piece was also that maybe there could be a way to have a pass, that some of these companies might get a pass from the fire department to be able to go and talk to residents. And we've been clear that that's not something that we're interested in doing. We do know that other cities do that, but that's not something we're interested in doing. So those are the main points, and going into detail about this. Again, the idea here is to just keep everybody safe and within the scene. And then once the scene is removed, which does happen, obviously, because the fire is off and they finish the investigation and they go, then obviously people can talk to whoever. So it's not a ban, it's just trying to make sure that everybody is safe. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk more about this, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos. I didn't note this early in the beginning. This is a voting session, so there will not be an opportunity to testify. But I'm going to now turn it over to council members for questions. I've got Councilman Schleifer, who's got the first question.
Thank you. Can you just elaborate on what you were saying about how the fire department can initiate such charges? You were saying that normally only the police do that. So what do you mean by that?
Yes, so the bill has to have its own penalties. We can't say a city law will be enforced by going to another law. So we had to put the exact same penalties that exist in the other law in this bill. So it's perhaps not articulated in the best possible way to say that the fire department can't use the other law. What it really means is, in this particular law, we're putting as the penalty the same penalties that exist in that other law for disorderly conduct, and essentially that's what's used by the police when you cross a crime scene. So we've just said, look, that makes good sense in the police crime scene context. We'll use the same penalties here. What we can't do is say the penalty for this bill is that the penalty for this law is that you violated another law. It's just a drafting issue. We can't say the penalty for our law is that you've now automatically violated a different law. We just take the penalties from the state law and mirror them in this law. Is that making any sense?
Yeah, I hear that, but the bill sponsor was saying that the fire department would be the one initiating that process. So let's say there's a scene set up, people aren't allowed on it, somebody comes in there and violates it. The bill sponsor was saying that the fire department would be initiating these charges against somebody, and I don't understand.
It's not that the fire department is charging someone, because again, that's done by the state's attorney. It is that they would be, just like any other agency, they'd be notifying the police that someone crossed the line, and then it would go through the normal criminal process. I mean, I think the comment was an allusion to the fact that when you cross a crime scene, there's plenty of police right there. So it's easy for them to kind of roll the two processes together. But here it would just be the fire department letting someone know that this person has crossed the scene, and then the police would come and do the paperwork, and it would be up to the state's attorney to charge.
But I mean, what you're saying, and that makes sense, that already happens. I mean, I've been on countless fire scenes, I've been on explosion scenes, I've been on crime scenes, and there's not a single one where the police are not present and overseeing that aspect of it. And depending on the scene and what the nature of the incident is who controls the scene. So a lot of fire scenes are not necessarily even controlled by the fire department. A lot of times, I've been on scenes, it's a little less common, but where certain federal agencies were overseeing the scene, and they were the point person on that. And so when you have those kind of situations, the underlining piece is that Baltimore City Police are at every single one of these scenes for the duration of the scene.
Right. I think the comment was about if it's a fire department controlled scene, the fire department would be the one saying, you know, this person just crossed the tape and that person was not authorized. So therefore, then the police can come in. You know, they're doing the factual information to the police. That doesn't happen at a crime scene where the police run it because they're both the enforcer and the fact giver. Here, I think the comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councilman, was just basically that
Yeah.
the fire department would, as the bill says, if it's their scene, they would be able to say which people have been given the authority to come there, so that then they'd turn to the police and say, wait a minute, that person's not authorized.
And
So I think that was the
But
comment.
Yeah,
that
and I
happens, that already happens. I mean, the last fire scene I was on, there was some type of domestic dispute related to the whole situation on how the fire might have started and not started. And some friends of the two parties showed up and others showed up, and the fire department just said, you know, those folks can't be here, and the police removed them, and somebody came back, and I'm pretty sure the police ended up detaining the person because they came back again, even after being told not to. And so the police already are doing this, so I guess I'm just not clear on what the difference would
I
be.
think the comment was about writing down what's done.
Also, thank you for clarifying and sort of parsing out what I was trying to say, and I appreciate that. So the idea is, you're correct that it is done, but part of the reason why we're doing this bill is to solidify so that the fire department is clear, everybody's super clear on who's doing what, and also what the penalties are. And so, as Hillary was saying, in a crime scene, there's already police, there, but in this case, the fire department would be saying, or whoever's in charge of the scene, in this case, the fire department, what the whole discussion came up, because that's already originally in the original bill. One of the suggestions was taking out the jail time. We said, no, we're gonna keep it in because it's consistent with what is in a crime scene already. And so that's how this whole discussion came up to begin with, because I actually did consider what some of the opposition was asking us to consider. So I wanted to explain a little bit about how we got to that and why we're not referencing the state law here. We are saying what the penalties are, because this is the law that would be broken, not as Hillary suggested, not necessarily pointing to another law. So that's why we had to keep it this way, because the chair had suggested, and I thought it was a good one, but I'm glad we had the conversation about maybe referencing that here, but that's not the case. So it's already in the bill. It's been in the bill from the beginning. The only change that we made was lowering from 90 days to 60 days, because that's consistent with disorderly conduct and the making sure that there's disobeying an order from an officer.
Right, because yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at the inclusion section on page 3, so my read of it is that if you're listing off who the inclusions are, if you're not on this list, because it says may include, so it's not saying that these folks are necessarily allowed on, it's saying that they might be able to be allowed on, but if you're not on this list, you can never be allowed on.
No, I mean, a court would read may as an example of the things in 2I, which is it's up to the person in charge of the scene. And again, we're assuming this is a fire department controlled scene. This isn't talking about a crime scene or if feds come in. But if the fire department's in control, it would be up to the chief or their designee to say who's authorized. And then the rest is read as a list of examples. So authorized may include. And so it's a list of examples. So for example, the President of the United States wants to show up and say something to the victims, probably going to be authorized. So that's, it's just reiterating that it's up to the fire chief. And again, that's why if it's a fire department controlled scene, the penalty for violating this law is the same as the one that would be but if you're the police officer and you arrest a person who crosses this scene, you could write them up for crossing the scene. Theoretically, the state's attorney could charge you with both the violation of this city code provision and the violation of a state law, and it would be up to the criminal process whether the two are merged, whether they plead to one or the other. I mean, it's just the normal process, but essentially you're making sure that the penalties are the same. So I think that gives some equity when you go and, when the state's attorney decides to charge or not. But essentially, it's going to be listed as, this is the penalty for violating the city code provision. I mean, nothing prevents the officer or the state's attorney from saying, well, sure, they crossed the crime scene, but I'm making this up, they also did it naked, so we're going to charge them with, violating a, disorderly or indecent conduct statute. So, I mean, it's not the only thing someone could be charged with, but it's saying, if you're only, this is the penalty for violating this city code provision, if that's making sense.
I just feel like
Yeah.
logistically, you would have to, when you're on the scene, you have to go to the person who's running the scene, and every scene has a point person. It's usually one of the battalion chiefs or something. You can go over to them and ask if you are allowed to be there. And so when you see like the list of people who can, if that's not saying that there's a higher level of authorization to these folks, because it's just giving examples of may, well then how does an elected official go and get permission without walking onto the scene and going to the person who needs to give permission?
Well, I mean, you could take the entire list of examples out and the law would still say the same thing. The chief gives the permission. So like anything, if you don't have permission, don't go do it. I mean, this is basically saying, ask for permission, not forgiveness. If you go the forgiveness route, you could be charged. Now, obviously, are you going to charge the council person? Probably not. I mean, again, built into our entire criminal justice system is some level of discretion. But the reality is these are a list of examples to give people an idea of who would be permitted. But obviously, it's up to the fire chief or whoever's running the scene to say who gets permission. And if you can't get their attention, then, caveat emptor.
The other, just to clarify, that the electeds fall under G in the reprint, an official defined by city code, which is us, with identification issued by the city. So we're included.
We're included as people we're just an example as people who may, not people who are automatically authorized.
We are authorized. We are authorized to go in.
Right.
Well, we're not authorized,
So-
we may be authorized, if the chief says so.
If
That's
you,
what it says.
if the chief says
That's
so,
what it
yes.
says.
If the
The
chief
person who is given
permits.
permission to present within the boundaries of an emergency scene by the chief.
So ultimately, just
mean,
to,
if
just
it's
to find,
unsafe,
excuse me,
chief
one
is gonna
second,
push us all
one
out
second,
if it's
Councilwoman,
unsafe.
I think ultimately, I want to try to sum up the line of questioning and get to the point here. It seems to me that there is a difference from a police crime scene and a fire crime scene. There may be fire crime scenes in which the police may not technically be there unless they are called upon by the fire department, and that's where this bill comes into play. My understanding is the logic for the sponsor is that we'd want to be able to give the fire department the same control of fire scenes that the police department has of crime scenes. The decision about who is allowed on a fire scene is ultimately up to the decision of the person who called the scene, a member of the fire department, chief or otherwise. And according to the law department, the inclusions list is not definitive. If the President of the United States decides he wants to come to a fire scene, or you yourself, Councilman, the fire department representative that called the scene can deem you appropriate to be on the scene. And that's the understanding.
that's correct.
Okay, is that clear?
Yeah, so where does like a company like BGE fit into this?
I think that would fall into the same situation.
The bill says the fire chief's in charge of the scene. If this is a fire scene, not a police scene or an FBI scene or whatever, the fire chief is the one to give permission. The list of examples is to give people, like any statute, it gives people an example of clearly who would be permitted. It helps a court in the future. Somebody gets charged with this law, they can point to that list and say, yeah, I was an inch over the crime, or, inch over the tape, but everyone knew I was permitted. Or alternatively, I went 5 feet in there, but gee, I didn't know I wasn't permitted. A court would look at that and go, well, really? Like, this is the reasonableness standard. So it's not an exclusive list because it doesn't say shall, it says may. But I mean, the idea is to give people a general idea of who would be permitted. And as the councilwoman said, if the scene becomes dangerous, people on that list who would be otherwise permitted can't just stand there and, make firefighting harder.
Right. So, yeah, and I think to that effect, it seems to me that depending on the safety of the situation, the fire department representative may change the degree of who may be be able to come, past the scene. For instance, if it's an active fire and maybe things are exploding and otherwise, you shouldn't be back there, Councilman. But if they mostly have it under control, but people are still moving around, there are, hoses and water and things like that, you don't mind getting wet, maybe you might be allowed, is how I think we might interpret this.
So I just think that,
Councilman, I want to make sure, we're going to come back to you.
Sure,
I want
no
to
problem.
make sure we get to other questions. Councilman Blanchard has a question. Oh, before, I want to also acknowledge Councilman Glover that's joined the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for the bill sponsor. The conversation around badging that was brought up in the original hearing, and you mentioned that was something that was explored. Can you just talk through what that
I'm sorry,
conversation,
could you repeat it? Sorry.
have the idea of having like a badge of
Okay.
people who are, I guess, kind of like a quasi-license type of thing? Can you just talk through what that conversation
Sure.
was?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the question. The initial suggestion was that maybe there could be some of the companies that come to scenes to deal with restoration and all of that could have a badge and they would automatically be allowed to go in the scene. So that was the suggestion. And in talking with the chief and the fire departments here, they can correct me if I'm wrong, is that, well, there's two pieces. One is that who's gonna decide? We are under an ethics law, so even the fire chief is under an ethics law. So we can't really say who's authorized if there are several companies that come and that one is only authorized. Well, why, right? So that's the same type of thing that, the companies are asking that we don't, refer, and then here they are asking for authorization to be referred. So that makes no sense. And secondly, because again, this is safety. This is a safety issue. And so once the scene is taken down, then anybody can go in and into the general area. So it's not like we're trying to be exclusive and we're not trying to ban anybody. It's just that during this scene, nobody should be in there unless they're absolutely necessary. And that's what we're trying to say here. So it could be a matter of an hour, it could be 3 or 4 hours that some folks don't come in, but they don't need to be there right away. And I think that, so that's where that discussion was. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Chief Ide, about, the concerns of the fire department, but that's where we landed.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chairman Conway and the rest of the council. As far as the badging is concerned,
If you could
and
state
the
your name for the record.
I'm sorry. Assistant Chief John Ide, Operations for Baltimore City Fire Department, representing James Wiles, Chief of the Fire Department. As far as badging is concerned, it's same with the may include list. I feel like when we get to the fire scenes as an operations chief, we pretty much try to exclude everyone right away until we can get our hands wrapped around it and mitigate what's going on. And as it de-escalates, more and more people, regardless if they have badge, whether they're a council member, whether they're a police department member, that's when the time is to start allowing people to slowly integrate into the scene. Along with BG&E, right at the beginning, we always call for BG&E to mitigate gas, electric, and it's not all the time that we let them in to the hot zone. We, tell them what we need, and then we stand back and say, okay, we're ready for you to come in. So regardless of badging, regardless of your rank, regardless of your title, we'll slowly start letting people in as we see fit to address the family members, the victims of the fire, whatever it is. So I think it's dynamic. I think a badge doesn't really apply in this case. And logistically for us to determine who gets a badge and who doesn't is problematic. And disseminate that information to the police and things like that. So
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chief Hyde. So I think it's both kind of becomes a licensing question. How does the thing even work and get adjudicated? And then it's also to have anyone, because it's all a matter of who may be on the scene at the discretion of the chief on the scene anyway, to have someone who would be automatically allowed would be kind of defeating the purpose of having that discretion for the on-scene commander.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, for the companies that do the restoration before they come on the scene, are they to come to whatever chief is conducting the fire at that time to provide any kind of like identification stating that, they are entitled to be on the scene to ask questions of the individuals in reference to the fire?
Yeah, I think that solidifies, the bill kind of solidifies who may be. Unfortunately, we don't single out like contractors and things like that. There are people that come up and ask to speak with the family, and at the time when there's not essential personnel interrupting incident commander, it causes distractions and safety concerns, and also some liability of them being in the scene. So I think the bill kind of solidifies that part of it to help us not have to deal with that until after we have the scene under control. So our incident commanders right now do not speak to outside contractors or civilians or news media. We have a PIO that takes care of news media. We're dealing with our fire department members and the essential people to mitigate the incident. And once the incident's mitigated and we take down that crime scene, anyone can come in. So no, we don't ask for identification. We exclude people based off of what we know their duties are when we're operating in that environment, whether it's the hot or warm zone, and everyone else stays outside the cold zone. So we try to tell our incident commanders to concentrate on our people, safety, and everything else. So right now we don't engage with contractors.
And the reason why I'm asking, because I'm like kind of battling with this, is I've experienced a fire on North Patterson Park about 3 years ago, and 3 individuals perished in the home, right? The elderly couple that owned the home was asking who's around to help, get their home back up to par, all right? So there was individuals from restoration companies or whatever that were probably on the scene, along with United Way, all those individuals, but they were offering information and they were excited about, the information that was given to them, someone that could help them like kind of sort of like right away, as opposed to them going to maybe a shelter or a hotel for that moment, but just to have someone on the scene that could provide them the other information that they need in order to get their home back operating the way it was. So I'm just kind of torn between like what would be the big issue. I understand that during the crime scene, no one's to go beyond the yellow, caution tape or whatever, and that's in reference to like any emergency, whether it's police or fire. But to have a company like speak with a relative, it ain't got to be directly to the victims themselves, but a relative, I don't see how there's any harm, anything like that, because again, I'm speaking on individuals that have gone through some of these circumstances in my district that have come to me and was kind of excited about those companies that were on the scene to help them because they just don't know. The victims have opportunity to say, you know what, I don't want to deal with you guys. I have an attorney or I have XYZ that can deal with this matter, but they was willing to cooperate, listen, and to my knowledge, I mean, many of you guys know Dr. Dorr, she's a well-educated woman. I mean, they were there to help her, to restore everything that she needed, but they were, again, after everything, the tape went down and things of that nature. So I just want to be clear, this bill is strictly for like, after the crime tape and everything has gone down, then we're allowing them to go in, or we're saying that they want to be able to go in and talk to the victims while everything's going on.
Thank you very much for that question so that we can clarify. I really appreciate it. Two things. To your last question, this bill gives the chief the authority to set up a scene, whether it's crime tape, barricade, fire trucks, okay? And to determine, based on this list and whomever is needed at the time and how safe it is, right? I've been to fires where Chief Wallace is like, Councilwoman, I really need you to go across the street because this is an unsafe situation, okay? And so they can do that, and then gives penalties if somebody keeps crossing, okay? After all that's done, when the fire is no longer there, when the chief deems that it's safe, everybody can go wherever, okay? And the second thing is that I totally understand. I've been to fires too, and people just are so traumatized with what's just happened to them that it is sometimes helpful if somebody is coming up to them saying, hey, I can really help you. Here's this, that, the other. Let me call the insurance company for you, which they're not allowed to do, and have that discussion. Since the Union Avenue fire in my district and the Keswick fire, we have worked with DHCD to come up with the Victim Services Crisis Services Unit. They are amazing. Miss Natasha and her team come out to every single, they've got the DHCD, they work with them on getting the hotel, all of the various things that are needed are there for them. If we're not there for our constituents to, think about things, the people are there, right? They're not gonna be the restoration, but they're gonna be the first ones so that person can trust, okay, that it's there because it's DHCD, they have the official logo. If the person doesn't have insurance, it's a lot of help that crisis unit provides for them, which unfortunately we have people that do not have homeowners insurance. If they do have insurance, that first call needs to be the insurance company to figure out what that next step is, but they may not be ready to call yet. So we're not saying that these companies can't show up. They just can't be right in the scene, right there. I had a situation at the Keswick fire where it wasn't Platinum, it was a different company, that I was literally hugging my constituent who had just saved her life, her mother's life, her dog, and her child. I'm hugging her, she's crying, and someone is poking her saying, here's my card, call us when you're, like, that's totally unreasonable, completely unreasonable. So what I'm saying is that everybody just needs to be patient, because it doesn't necessarily, isn't always necessarily these companies. It's also can be, other curious folks in the neighborhood. It could be whomever. We're trying to just keep people safe, and that's the bottom line here. And so when the caution tape or the barricades come down, everybody has a chance to talk to each other and be able to figure the next steps out.
So was this bill drafted because of that situation of, you have to be on the scene and the individual
Yes.
having been poking you and things of the nature, but we have never had any phone calls or any interruptions like in the past if you've gone to fires and things of the nature? I understand you said that you've gone to the scene and the chief has said, hey, Councilwoman, just, stay back for a moment. But what I'm asking is is it just that one occurrence that happened for you to
No,
to
I mean,
judge
and at the hearing, we heard from two of my constituents that also had this issue. Now, I totally get it. I certainly approach this from that standpoint. This bill says nothing about those companies. This is about anybody in the scene. Anybody in the scene. If it's unsafe, they need to be taken out, and there has to be penalties for not abiding by the rule. Chief and I had talked about this a lot so that he can have, and the fire department can have, guidance on what happens at a scene in this case. So yeah, you're totally right. I absolutely approached it with that in mind, with that incident in mind, and several others that I've had in my fires. But it's also seeing all the other people who show up to fires but just making sure that the fire department can keep everybody safe within those boundaries. And then when the boundaries come off, everybody can talk to everybody else. But it's just during that time where it's a real problem and it's unsafe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of the bill, is it just to establish penalties? Because from what I understand, if it's unsafe on the scene, they're going to tell you to back up, to put some space, just like you said, they told you to go across the street. So is this just about establishing penalties?
That's a great question, thank you. It's to be able to provide the guidance that the fire department needs to be able to set up a scene, because a lot of times right now there isn't actually tape or barricade or anything. So to be very defined about what that is. But also that if there is somebody that continues, this isn't gonna be like a first time thing, they get a warning, and then if they continue to cross, that there is some way to establish a penalty if needed. I don't know that the department would ever use it, because obviously people want to get out of the way if it's unsafe. But it does provide the same type of situation as if you're crossing a crime scene.
Thank you.
Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my last thing on it. I support the intent of the bill. I think that it's important that laws provide clarity so that we all know going into something what is and isn't allowed and what's gray area or not. Having been on as many scenes as I have, which is a lot, like one of the first things I always see is BGE pulling up and trying to turn off the gas or something like that. And I don't really, in reviewing the bill and hearing from Hillary, I really don't see what the purpose of the bill is when it's may include this and may include that. It seems to me that it just creates more confusion. Whereas what it really should be is, here is who can and who can't. And then if the chief says something, that overrides everything, but that you're automatically authorized. So the following people are automatically authorized. Because right now, if I worked for BGE and I read this and I'm not listed here, I would be like, well, I'm not going on the scene until they give permission. If they take extra time to go turn off the gas because they're afraid that they're not immediately authorized unless said so, then it would delay that response. And when you look at just the different items along the board here, I mean, the only ones that are obvious to me that are authorized are the fire department and the police department. So when we're adding in these other folks here, like even as a council person, if it doesn't say you're authorized, well then you don't want to go onto the scene unless you have that permission. So I think it just needs to be very clear who's allowed, who's not allowed, because this actually, in my opinion, based on the word may, will create more confusion. I mean, I'm more confused by this than not. And I think that, when I look at certain community or volunteer-based organizations, I've been on scenes where, groups that get clothing, provide clothing, for instance, show up on scene and they want to run up there and ask, what size the family members are. We've all seen that kind of stuff. Well, are you allowed on or are you not allowed on? And so I just think that there needs to be that first level to create that differentiation. Otherwise, we're just creating more confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further questions? All right. With that, I see no further questions. I will entertain a motion to recommend the amendments favorably. There's a list of amendments sent out. Is there a motion to recommend the amendments favorably? So moved. It's moved by Blanchard. Is there a second? Second by Glover. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The amendments have moved favorably. Is there a motion to move the bill as amended?
Would we entertain a motion to send it back to committee to resolve these points that were made?
I would be happy to work with you if we wanted to do like a second reader floor thing, if there needed to be more clarity. There was a very big discussion around this may versus shall piece. And we wanted to try to provide the chief with the most discretion possible. And that way there's, little confusion. So that's where we are. And, if you wanted to put something in on second reader to try to clarify, I know we worked on these very specifically with the mayor's office and the chief to make sure that we resolved all of this.
Yeah, I just know, I think we all here support our fire officers and, the unions that represent them do, their primary role is safety of the fire officers. And, they're currently, they want to see certain changes made. And I think it would just be cleaner if those changes could be made before we're asked to vote on it.
So this was introduced in February. We had a hearing in April. I sent the amendments out on Friday so that there was enough time for the committee to take a look. And if there were questions or concerns, which I called all committee members, to figure this out. The union just wrote us a letter back in April, and then today did not mention anything about what you just said, and still just registered their disapproval. So I haven't seen any language to try to change anything, and what you're asking for was actually hasn't nothing to do with even the amendments. You could have said, hey, I have a question about this, and we could have had a discussion about it when we talked yesterday, when I sent the amendments, and when I tried to call you. So we've had this in front of us for a really, really long time.
All right, and
Council,
so,
both council members, just to stay on track, I hear the proposal. It's something certainly we can discuss, and I think that's what we're discussing now. I think there's some frustration, obviously, from the sponsor about not exploring those things before the hearing today, which I think is fair. We can come back to this. I want to make sure there's a point to be made by Councilman Blanchard, and I think it's relevant to this, so Councilman Blanchard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It is relevant to it. My impression of it, the whole authorized, the chief is authorized to determine who is allowed to be on the scene, right? And I think that actually, knowing just like how fluid, and you can't like mandate these, every situation is going to be different, and we have like trained chiefs with a lot of experience to be able to use this discretion, and we want them to be able to have this discretion. I guess my only concern here would be assuming that, like chiefs aren't going to know the whole city code like off the top of their head, is that it gets communicated to the scene commanders that it is within they have the judgment to make these calls, and it's not, hey, here's the list of who's allowed on, right? And so just like when it goes from the city code to the actual like getting translated to policy, assuming that this legislation passes, I think that's just important that needs to be effectively communicated, because I could imagine a situation where the way it translates down to the firehouses is not the same as the conversation we're having today.
And thanks for that, Councilman. Mr. Chair, if I may, we worked as a sponsor.
Name for the record.
Tyler Schnella, Deputy Director of Government Relations. We worked very closely with the sponsor on the bill on these amendments, right? We've worked with the fire department, so the package in front of you is what the administration supports. We do not support mandating specific people to be on the scene. We support the flexibility of our fire chief and our subsequent incident commanders to be able to make the determination based on the scene and who's present as to whether or not they need to be on the scene or not. This is not just about fires, right? We've had oil spills, we've had all kinds of emergencies where we're not even just talking about the restoration companies, we're talking about media. There are many different people who try to get access to emergency scenes for various reasons. And what we need to make sure is that our fire chief has the tools that he needs to be able to control his scene, to ensure the safety of our city, our residents, our businesses, et cetera. So that is what this is. I think that's kind of an overcomplication of the bill. It is quite literally allowing the fire chief to establish a fire scene with barricade tape, or in the event of a serious emergency, he just needs to use fire trucks. And the police can support through what we've put in what we've amended into the bill, which would allow for law enforcement remedy to those who still choose to violate the chief's will, which is that this is an active fire scene. They barricaded and said that anything that happens outside of that tape, if a resident in the event of a fire decides that they want to go talk to a restoration company or even the news, they can go outside of the tape and do what they will. What this bill is saying, inside of that tape, the fire chief or the incident commander controls who gets access, period. That's all it does. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Tylor. I think, here, I'm just gonna make a decision here. I don't see any reason to stop moving forward with this. I think this is permissive enough that the companies in this room that have had issues with this would have an opportunity to move beyond the lines. But that would be at the discretion of the fire chief or whoever commands the scene. As far as the explicit language and the list of people, my understanding has been stated here, and I think as will be relayed to the members of the fire department, is that they have the discretion on that scene, and that this is a sort of suggested list, the kinds of people that may need to get behind the scene while the scene is still active. But I think to that effect, I don't think we gain all that much by waiting. If there are, I would encourage Councilman, you to work with the sponsor to think about how to fine tune that language. But I think the bill that we have here today, and at least what we're trying to accomplish here today, I think makes a lot of sense, just from like a basic safety perspective. How we tailor that language, so that it's not super complicated or uncertain. I think that's a fair question to bring up. But I don't think it should stop us from giving members of the fire department, whoever controls the scene, the fire chief or whoever is deemed otherwise, the ability to declare that scene. So I think I'm going to recommend that we just move forward with this. And I encourage you to work with the sponsor on fine tuning that list, or maybe eliminating the list and just completely leaving it up to the fire chief under those circumstances. But I think Councilmember Ramos, it sounds like you would be willing to doing that. Yeah. All right. Any further on readiness? We haven't even considered a motion yet. There's no motion on the floor. There wasn't a second. Any further on readiness? Questions, concerns? I'll entertain a motion to move the bill favorable as amended. Moved by Blanchard. Second by Gray. We'll do a roll call. I think I've made pretty clear how I stand on this. I'm going to say yes. Councilman Blanchard? Yes. Councilman McCray? Yes. That's fair. It's Gray, we got you for a yes. McCray?
Yes.
Schleifer?
Can I explain my vote?
Yes, sir.
So when I met with the bill sponsor about this originally, I fully supported the concept of what it was going to accomplish. I've seen different challenges, and one of the key things that we discussed was the fact that it provided clear authorization, specifically related to council members who are on scene, giving them the authorization, obviously, unless that could be revoked. And so, given that I'm, now hearing like from Hillary that it's really just the same the way it's always been. I mean, the fire chief yesterday authorizes people or doesn't authorize them, and tomorrow he's going to authorize them and doesn't authorize them either. And the police are on scene there. They remove people from scenes all the time. I don't like the ambiguity. I appreciate the intent of the bill, but there needs to be clarity. We should not be getting into a situation where we're going on a scene and then there is ambiguity and it depends on who's there, and if the chief's not there, you know, is it the battalion chief? Who's calling the shots there? There should be the clarity that the following people are authorized. Everybody else is not unless explicitly said otherwise. So if you work for BGE and you're there for doing gas line stuff, you should be automatically authorized unless told otherwise. If you're a city representative with a city ID, you're on the city council, if you work for the housing department, you're automatically authorized unless otherwise said. Then I feel like we get into the situation where they're picking and choosing. And I love the fire chief. I think he's doing an excellent job, and he shows up to more scenes than any other fire chief I've ever seen. But with that being said, there's honestly just more confusion here than not. And so right now I'm going to vote no in committee, but if that is cleaned up by second reader, I'm more than happy to support having that clarity of who is and who is not allowed. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Porter
Yes.
and Councilman Glover.
No.
There are 5 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative. This bill will move on to second reader at our next council meeting. I want to thank you guys for the deliberation and robust back and forth. And I hope, Councilwoman Schleifer, you and the sponsor can work out any of the details about your concerns before second reader. All right, this hearing is adjourned.